Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. In 2018, my parents, John and Sarah, had enough savings to build a modest ranch-style home in a rural area. The local First Community Bank approved their mortgage, and they signed a contract for the bank to provide the funds for construction. However, the contractor they hired, Mike, was biting off more than he could chew, taking on too many projects around town. His inexperienced crew was left to handle the actual work, leading to a disastrous build. We're not talking about minor issues like the wrong paint color or sloppy trim work. These guys made major blunders, framing a wall right through where the bathtub was supposed to go, securing the kitchen cabinets to the drywall with just a few roofing nails instead of properly mounting them to the studs, and even framing the garage door opening into the living room instead of facing the driveway. It was a complete mess. When the bank's inspector, Frank, arrived for the final walkthrough, my parents met him in the front yard and refused to sign off on Mike's shoddy workmanship. Frank grew irate, as the bank had already paid Mike a significant sum. He stormed up to the front door and yanked on the handle, only for the entire door frame to collapse. It had simply been wedged in place, not properly secured. The bank summoned Mike, who finally showed up to oversee the work himself, but he proved just as incompetent as his crew. My parents adamantly refused to approve the house in its current state. With my mom stuck in a cramped rental with 2 young kids while my dad worked around the clock to make ends meet, the situation took a heavy toll. The bank and Mike treated them horribly, bullying my mom and lying to my dad. What should have been an exciting milestone became a nightmare, leaving my mom in tears and my dad depressed. Eventually, the bank threatened foreclosure, and Mike threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract since the bank refused to pay him any further. Feeling hopeless, my parents sought legal counsel from an attorney, Tom. They laid out the whole sad story, the plumbing issues, electrical problems, shoddy tiling, and more. With only their modest down payment savings, they feared a lengthy legal battle would bankrupt them, handing victory to the bank and Mike. At first, Tom's grim expression seemed to confirm their worst fears, but then a sly smile crept across his face. "Let's get everyone together for a meeting," he told my parents. "Tomorrow." The next day, my parents, Tom, Frank, the bank's lawyer, Mike, and Mike's lawyer gathered at the bank's office. Before anyone else could speak, Tom took charge. "Well, my clients have decided they no longer want this house. Please remove it." Laughter erupted from the others. "Remove it? Are you insane?" Tom dramatically produced a deed and slapped it on the table. "My clients own the land the house is sitting on outright. They no longer want the house. Get it off their property." Mike's lawyer stared at the deed in disbelief, then turned to Mike. "You built a house on land you don't own." Mike sheepishly nodded. The bank's lawyer rounded on Frank, shouting, "You didn't finance the land the house is on?" Frank stuttered, No. "As I said, gentlemen," Tom stated firmly, "you're trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the property restored to its original condition. Immediately." My dad said he'd never forget the dumbfounded looks exchanged on the other side of the table. Sure, the bank could foreclose on a house that would soon cease to exist, with no way to recoup their investment since they didn't even own the underlying land. Mike stood to lose the 50% he'd paid out of pocket, plus the cost of demolishing and removing the structure. And the bank would undoubtedly demand he repay their initial 50% contribution. Could they have gone after my parents? Possibly, but a foreclosure would only damage their credit and potentially cost them their down payment. Signing off on the house in its current condition meant pouring thousands more into repairs and replacements from top to bottom before it would be livable. The bank knew my parents couldn't afford that. They're the ones who approved the mortgage. Suddenly, my parents were the reasonable ones, and it was all just a big misunderstanding. The bank and Mike couldn't do enough to make amends. The house was brought up to the original specifications immediately, at no extra cost to my parents, though a massive expense for Mike. My parents signed the mortgage documents. Mike got the remaining payment, barely breaking even on the job. And Frank? He got fired. As for Tom, that brilliant attorney earned a legendary tale of triumph to recount to his colleagues for years to come. The next one is an entitled people story. When my wife and I bought our house last year, one of the things we loved most was the beautiful, lush hedge that ran along our property line, separating us from our neighbor. The hedge provided great privacy and really made both our yards feel secluded and serene. According to our real estate agent, the hedge had been there for over 30 years and was jointly owned and maintained by both households. Our neighbor at the time was an elderly widow named Marge, and she was absolutely lovely. She welcomed us to the neighborhood right away and assured us that she took pride in caring for our hedge. Marge's nephew lived with her and helped tend to the yard work and home maintenance. He was always friendly when we saw him outside gardening or mowing the lawn. When Marge passed away 6 months after we moved in, the nephew inherited her house. That's when the trouble started. The nephew, whose name we soon learned was Mickey, did not share his aunt's respect for the Hedge or her neighborly ways. Right after moving into his newly inherited house, Mickey started tossing garbage and yard debris over the Hedge into our yard. Empty beer cans, pizza boxes, grass clippings, you name it. My wife went over to politely ask him to stop more than once, but he either ignored her or mumbled something rude in response. I tried approaching him myself, but had no luck either. The littering continued. Then came the day when I was working in the yard and heard an ear-piercing buzzing noise. I looked up to see Mickey on the other side of the hedge, chainsaw in hand, cutting away large sections with reckless abandon. My pleas for him to stop were drowned out by the buzzing saw. By the time he was done, over a third of the once lush hedge was totally destroyed. The carefully maintained barrier between our yards was now a warped, sparse patchwork of bare branches and holes. I was livid and immediately called Mickey to demand an explanation. "It's my property line too. I can do whatever I want," he yelled back. He claimed the hedge was diseased and needed to be cut back, but I saw no signs of disease on the parts he chopped down. Over the next few weeks, I continued requesting that Mickey replace the portion of hedge he damaged or at least pay for me to do so. He always had some excuse. He was low on money that month, had to work overtime, was going on vacation, and so on. Meanwhile, the hacked-up hedge remained an eyesore, no longer able to provide that sense of comfortable privacy my wife and I had enjoyed. Eventually, I'd had enough of the excuses and half-promises. I decided to pursue legal action against Mickey for the destruction of jointly owned property. I met with a lawyer who helped me take the matter before a small claims court judge. The evidence was clear. Multiple photos showing the healthy, full hedge before Mickey moved in, as well as the chopped-up, shoddy remains. I also had a signed statement from the previous owner, Marge, attesting that she and the homeowner on my side were committed to equal maintenance of the hedge. In court, I presented repair quotes from professional landscapers, proving that the extensive restoration work would cost over $2,000. Mickey continued to insist he had the right to do as he pleased since he was now co-owner, but the judge wasn't having it. She declared that the hedge was jointly owned property that required mutual agreement for any alterations. Since Mickey failed to consult with us before destroying over a third of it, the judge deemed him solely responsible for the repairs. She ordered Mickey to pay the $2,000 for hedge restoration in full within 30 days. If he failed to do so, he would incur additional fines and potential wage garnishment. The judge also forbade any further alterations to the hedge without our express written consent. Mickey fought the ruling at first, but eventually paid up when he realized the financial penalties he faced. My wife and I happily hired the landscapers to come replace the damaged sections and trim up the existing hedge. When the work was complete, our yard was enclosed in a uniform, healthy hedge just like before. We also had a new wooden fence installed on our side to provide an extra barrier. But I'll admit, it felt great making Mickey take responsibility for destroying our hedge without asking. The court's ruling was a clear reminder that shared property requires mutual respect. Mickey learned the hard way that he couldn't just trample all over our yard rights on a whim. Going legal to defend our beautiful hedge was the right call. Now my wife and I can enjoy our tranquil backyard without having to endure either debris or the sight of Mickey on the other side. The judge's order put a firm end to his inconsiderate behavior. I'm just glad I didn't let Mickey get away with it easily. In the end, we got both a restored hedge and a good lesson for the neighbor. The next one is a petty revenge story. Many years ago, partner 40M wanted to apply for a project management job in his current company. Would be a promotion and salary upgrade. The division head where the job was located told him not to bother applying as he wasn't qualified. Background: partner had same qualifications as person leaving. He had previously blocked division head from illegally using funds. Lord forbid he told them no. When they tried to go over his head, company supervisor also told them no, as what they wanted to do was illegal, backing up my partner. Fast forward a year later. The person they hired for the job had to go on medical leave for 4 months. In a meeting between partner section and division head, one who told him not to bother applying for position, he stated partner could just fill in to do the job while other person was gone. In front of everyone from both his company and all the division bigwigs, partner said in a completely calm, expressionless voice, "You told me last year I wasn't qualified to do the job, so not to even bother applying as you'd make sure I didn't get it. However, if you now feel I am now qualified, I will be happy do the job temporarily at the higher salary." Room was silent. The director of the division looked at the head and asked, "Did you actually say that? It's illegal and a potential lawsuit, BTW." When the guy stuttered and tried to explain, basically admitting he did say that. The director held up his hand to stop him from incriminating himself in the division and told the guy, "We will discuss this later. Meanwhile, you will be taking over the position duties while the person is on medical leave." After everyone from their division left, my partner's boss told him she about bust from keeping the laughter in at the guy's face and wished she could be a fly on the wall for that conversation. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I'm a teacher at a small new school. We currently have 2 year levels, so our teaching schedules are incredibly light. This means every teacher has at least one day where they have no classes, and it's common to take leave on that day. Mine is Friday. I realized we will move to a full schedule next month and figured I might as well use some excess leave and applied to take Fridays for the rest of the month off. Later, I was told my leave was denied because it's not nice that you get to have multiple long weekends when your colleagues don't. And I responded with, "So you're saying just because my lesson-free day is on a Friday, I don't get to take leave even though the science teachers can take every Tuesday off, language teachers take every Thursday, and so on?" He kind of waffled around that it doesn't look good, and that I still have to consider a homeroom lesson I have Fridays, which is a student-led activity time. I'm actually not supposed to do anything/intervene, just be present while students handle everything that someone else will have to cover. I've always gotten my own covers before applying for leave, so HR has never even had to do anything. Anyway, I told him straight up that I don't mind if they want to deny my leave, but to remember that I'm there because I want to be, not because I need to be. I told him, "Okay, but just so you know, it was a courtesy on my end to use my leave on days with the least impact. So you're essentially telling me you'd rather me take leave on days I miss actual classes, which I have no qualms doing." He kind of mumbled something, and then I thanked him and left. So that Friday I came in, and then the following Monday I called in sick and missed my class. I have about 20 leave days to use over the next approximately 7 months, not counting school holes, that make up the final year of my contract here, and I plan to use all of them. I've also told them on a separate occasion that there's literally no downside to me whether or not they deny my leave requests, because 80% of the leave I've taken the past 2 years has been unpaid because I don't care about the money. Once they denied a 3-day unpaid leave request and I told a colleague, "I can just not show up. What are they gonna do? Not pay me?" That's literally what I asked for in the first place, so either way I get what I want. They need me more than I need them, as the sole teacher of the most popular elective subject in the school. It's somewhat niche, so it's not easy to just find a replacement. Not to mention I have both qualifications and experience in my subject's industry, so any replacement they do find is probably going to be not as good. The next one is an entitled people story. I got pregnant in November. Previous to this, I had a very difficult miscarriage, so this time me around, I decided not to tell anyone of the pregnancy until I was 12 weeks along. A couple of times during those initial 12 weeks, sister-in-law would ask point blank if I was pregnant. I always tried to politely brush it off and just hold my belly and say I love food, implying I'm just fat. Once 12 weeks rolled around, my husband and I told my parents and his parents. I guess his parents told his sister, but that didn't bother me too much. I figure it's past 12 weeks, so it's not a secret, and sister-in-law had been pregnant before, so she knows how private these things can be. Well, apparently I was wrong. My in-laws had a gathering at my husband's grandmother's house, and several times sister-in-law brings up how I'm pregnant, and she called it. At one point, she called me a liar because I didn't confirm with her when she asked point blank. I just kept looking away, and people were giving her weird looks but not confronting her. Nobody was really even speaking to her. She was just talking loudly to herself. She just didn't drop the subject, so I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Why are you so obsessed with my uterus? Seems a bit weird." And she got offended and called me a liar again for not confirming with her when she asked point blank. I looked at her again and said, "Asking if someone is pregnant is a really rude question. I don't know why you think it's appropriate, but of course, if you always want to be first to know, I can text you post-coitally every time I have sex with your brother. That way, you can even have the astrology sign of the future baby figured out." She looked at me disgusted and just kept saying it's wrong to lie, and my husband and I and my toddler left. I burst into tears as soon as we left, but my husband was completely on my side about it. His mom even called me the next day to say that she spoke to sister-in-law to say she was inappropriate. Sister-in-law now refuses to look at me for any family functions. Easier for me. The next one is an entitled parents story. So, a bit of context, I recently accepted myself as gender fluid. Haven't come out to basically anyone yet except maybe for my best friend, a small part of my family, and, well, you guys right now. Or so I wanted. I'll explain what happened a few months ago. My grandma, who is on a walker and cannot move too much on her own, asked us to visit. By that moment, we had just reached 1 million COVID cases here, so mostly all of us rejected. Besides, I live a bus ride from her, bus ride with people who don't seem to know about public distancing. And I also live with my mom, who is a risk patient as well. I didn't want to put any of them at risk, so a few days ago we went finally to visit since the cases were going down. Although I insisted on wearing my mask at all times, tried to approach people as less as possible and do not touch other people's stuff. And met with my cousins again. So I was on a phone call with my best friend, and I told her I was a bit uncomfortable with what I was wearing because of some comments one of my conservative aunt was making. She's always been kind of conservative, like whenever I talked about my plans for adulthood, she said, "For your 30s, with a husband and a family, I hope." Since it was kind of chilly, I was wearing my favorite hoodie and some jeans, not those that are tight, but those that are loose on all parts. This, plus I was wearing a black wool cap that made my hair seem shorter since it pulled it up. I did look a bit more boyish. Well, not exactly like that. I wanted to seem a bit of both, but, well, felt like looking more like a boy that day. But I still was looking normal, yet she'd always say, "You always had such a nice body, such a shame you decide to act like a boy and not like the nice girl you are." I told my friend on the phone, I wonder if one day she'll understand I'm no longer a girl. Turns out my youngest cousin, who is 6, heard me. He was looking for me since he thought I was playing hide and seek because I left the room where we were watching TV. I end my call and walk back inside, only to find myself in front of, "How dare you confuse my child with your complex of attention seeking?" I was like, "What? You said you were no longer a girl. What are you then? A traba?" Quick note. Trabas are a way to call trans people here. I don't fully know if it's offensive or not, though. I don't find it offensive since mostly all people I know of my age only say it ironically, like to talk about Fleur de la Vie, but still respect her later on. Well, not exactly. I always knew you were a bad influence to my kids. You'll give them the gay. Now, my uncle was trying to calm her down. All her yelling must have been heard from the streets. He failed. So, no way to reason with her, I just walked away and texted my other aunt, who I live with, to pick me up and take me home. Haven't spoken to anybody else on that side of the family yet. The next one is an entitled parent story. I'm in my late 20s. I live on my own and have my own car. My parents are super strict and made me miss out on the college experience, which I'm still bitter about. I come from a family of extroverted people, such as my cousin, who's also accomplished career-wise, but still throws parties with around 70 people, responsibly. She got to have the whole exciting college experience involving large social events and pursuit of creative passions, and now has fun alongside her career. She also wrote and starred in her own musicals, and I have a similar passion for acting that I've never gotten to pursue. I got the similar genes of being fun-loving, creatively passionate, and wanting to enjoy my life. I moved out at 25 to make up for what I've missed out, or at least enjoy my current freedom. The years after moving out have been the best years of my life. However, my parents still make me feel restricted. They literally hired detectives to remotely tap into my phone and read my text messages. They found out I was staying over a friend's house, one of their rules is to never stay over someone's house, and got so mad that they threatened to show up the friend's house to tell her to leave me alone. They're also tracking my car because they know when I'm out late and scold me for it. I can probably find the tracker and remove it, but the detectives part worries me, since they're able to do this without a tracker. I guess I'm venting and asking, how do I get them to stop this? Should I threaten to reduce in-person time with them from once a week to every 2 weeks? They got really mad when I suggested that before, because even with weekly visits, they miss me too much. I feel sad because I'm missing out socially and romantically, as they still manage to enforce their rules of don't go out after sunset, which is 5:30 p.m., don't sleep over, and don't go out on weekdays to focus on work. I would love to meet and organically form a romantic connection with someone, but my opportunity to meet new people is restricted since after work, weekend times after dark, and the once-a-week day they see me, since they occupy the daylight hours, are off limits for socializing. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.